Well, girls here in Northeast Florida are referred to the juvenile justice system for a number of reasons. And the positive thing that's happening is the work that's being done through the Justice for Girls Duval County Initiative and through the leadership of our council, who is citizen leaders who really come together and developed a strategic plan to change how the First Coast is really responding to and treating girls and young women in the juvenile justice system. And as a result of that, we have really created momentum. And with that momentum, we've been able to develop and institute the Girl Matters It's Elementary project at the two public schools, North Shore and George Washington Carver, and we are seeing incredible results of keeping girls in school. And so that early prevention has really been the catalyst for many other things to happen. And on the positive note, we've also come together with our Department of Probation, with the folks at the Detention Center, as well as the JAC. And through that partnership, we're creating training and we're talking about interventions that can actually be in those places. So I think what we're seeing change is that we're seeing people be more thoughtful, and we're having a dialogue about alternatives to girls being incarcerated. What hasn't changed is we're still sending far too many girls away outside of our community to razor-wired facilities. And once the girls are sent away, they're disconnected. They're taken away from their families. They're taken away from their communities. And we do not have any services of reentry when they come home. So we further victimize, we further traumatize these girls, and we're doing nothing to help them deal with the victimization and trauma that really push them into the system. And that needs to change. On the types of offenses that girls get caught up in the juvenile justice system with is a really good question. Because the majority of girls come into the system for far less serious offenses than males. We still know the trajectory for most girls is that there's abuse happening in the home, she runs away, she gets caught up in street life, and it's that running away from the abuse that really becomes the driver for her ending up in the system. And although there is a myth that girls are becoming more violent, when you look at the 10-year trend analysis, which we've done through the NCCD Center for Girls and Young Women, in fact, violent offenses are going down for both boys and girls. And so the majority of girls who are coming into the system do not need to be placed in a razor-wire facility. They can be better served in the local community. These are girls who need treatment, not punishment. What seems to be working well are programs that are located in the community that are focused on treatment, that are focused on education, and that are providing career opportunities or vocational opportunities for girls. That seems to be helping. But we still have to address the overuse of technical violations of probation, where girls are, without having committed another crime or another offense, they're technically violated for things that, quite honestly, if they were over the age of 18, wouldn't be against the law. Curfew violations, running away from home, those kinds of behaviors that many of us did as teenage girls. But when you're being monitored, you continue to get caught up in the system. And what works, we know, is treatment programs. We know by providing gender-responsive services that are really designed to address the victimization and the trauma and the family issues, that family disputes that are happening will reduce girls' entry and their stay in the juvenile justice system. And when we think about what's happening with girls, the other issue that we have to truly take into account is that many of the girls end up in the system because of fighting that happens in the context of family. And that used to be handled through child services. And now, with the change in the domestic violence laws, what we see is many of the girls are being charged with domestic violence, assault and battery for mutual hitting that's happening in the home. And what must change is that we absolutely support the mandatory domestic violence laws, but the intention of those laws was for spousal abuse. and they're being misapplied for girls and young women, and it's derailing their lives, and it's certainly impacting their long-term future, because once they get a domestic violence charge, for many of the girls, it means they can't get a scholarship, they can't be approved for certain jobs, they can't be accepted in certain colleges, so that has a tremendous impact on their long-term career options. I use Duval County and the First Coast as the example for other cities and other communities, because what's happening here is truly setting the standard. And the fact that citizen leaders and funders and concerned citizens have come together and made girls in the juvenile justice system a priority in our community is something that, quite honestly, makes me proud to live in this community. Not only have we utilized the Justice for Girls Duval County initiative as the model for this country, but we've talked about it in our work outside of this country. So we've done articles that have been published in international journals as well as national journals to really talk about the work that's happening here. So what we see, this is the standard. And no other community has really come together in a thoughtful and deliberate way to develop a strategic plan to address advocacy initiatives, to look at the policies and the laws and the processes that are resulting in girls being pushed into the system and the disparate treatment. And no other community has this thoughtful, strategic plan to develop a continuum of services. And not only do we have that plan, it's being implemented with the programs and services here in Duval County that are demonstration projects for the rest of the country. It's really exciting, and I continue to tell everyone that Jacksonville, Florida will become, and it's well on its way to becoming, the model for this country in terms of how to respond to the needs of girls in the juvenile justice system. So this two-tiered approach of having the advocacy initiative to really look at what are the laws, what are the processes that are impacting the lives of girls and young women, and what it is that we need to do to change that. And we've had much success. In fact, Florida was the second state in the country to pass a law that mandates gender responsive services for girls and young women in the juvenile justice system. Oregon was the first here. That these are in fact girls who have tremendous need. They have high need and they're low risk in the community. Yet we have these systems who focus on controlling behavior and not really addressing the victimization and the trauma, the hurt and the pain that's really driving girls into the system. I would start with Senate Bill 2737, which is the detention bill. And this really goes to the work of the advocacy work that we're doing with the Justice for Girls Duval County initiative. And that bill was passed a couple of years ago, but it's really resulted in our detention centers, the juvenile detention centers, being closed in some of our communities and being run now by the Sheriff's Department, which means our children, both boys and girls, are being placed in adult jails. And we're already seeing a horrible impact of that. So that really took us backwards. And in a state where we were starting to move forward in our work with juvenile justice. So addressing that statute, that has to change. And it's going to have a disparate impact on girls particularly, because we know when girls are in those kind of adult situations, those adult facilities, they have higher rates of abuse, higher rates of use of physical restraints, just horrible things happen to girls. And for girls who come in with serious mental health issues, it just exacerbates that when we put them in those kind of jail settings. When we first started this initiative, the first thing I did was I went to a razor wire facility in the Panhandle where a number of girls from our Jacksonville community were incarcerated. And I asked them what they would want to share. If they had an opportunity to talk to people who could change how the juvenile justice system treated girls, what would they say? And the girls are so brilliant. And one of the girls And I remember what she said, and I think about it so often. She said, ask them to know me for who I am, not what people tell them that I am. Another girl said, ask the adults to be there for us, to do what our parents couldn't do, to be a friend. I have no one to talk to, and even when I try to be good, I have no one, and I try to be good, but I always mess up. And when I heard her words, I thought, when I was driving back home along I-10, back home to Jacksonville, I thought, it's not the girls who continue to mess up, but it's the system who continues to mess up and who continues to not provide the early intervention and the services in our local community that helps to heal the wounds that are so prevalent in the lives of girls in the juvenile justice system. And we're not focusing on families, and we're not investing in families. And I'm proud to live in a community that's doing just that, and that's really setting the standard for the rest of the country on how citizens can come together with advocates and with professionals in the field of juvenile justice and truly make a difference at the local level. And that's exactly what's happening right here on the First Coast. The research that we did a few years ago in the report Rallying Cry for Change, we found that the majority of girls, I think it was about 86%, had these concrete goals for their future. And despite the fact of what had happened to them, and what we know is about 92% of the girls coming into the juvenile justice system have histories of victimization and abuse, and particularly sexual abuse. Despite what had happened to them, the challenges that were really overwhelming when you hear their life stories, they have this incredible hope and zeal for the future. And we have this opportunity, and I believe an obligation as adults, to provide that opportunity for them to really build on those strengths.